Tonight, Washington is sending one message to the world. The Iran conflict is far from over. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth confirmed that the Pentagon already has plans on the table to escalate military operations if the fragile ceasefire collapses. And that changes everything. Americans were told this conflict might cool down after weeks of strikes, naval blockades, and missile attacks near the Strait of Hormuz. Instead, lawmakers in Congress are now hearing that the US military is preparing for both a larger war and a longer one. The Pentagon says the conflict has already cost nearly $29 billion, and officials are warning that shipping lanes, oil markets, and US forces across the Middle East remains under threat. What makes this especially dangerous is how unstable the current pause really is. Iran has continued warning that any new American strike could trigger relation across the region, while the US insists it's ready to reopen combat operations at any moment. Behind the scenes, military planners are reportedly weighing scenarios involving missile defense systems, expanded naval deployments, and possible strikes tied to Iran's control around the Strait of Hormuz. That waterway handles a huge chunk of the world's oil supply, so if fighting intensifies there again, Americans could feel it almost immediately through gas prices, inflation, and supply chain disruption. This is no longer just a regional conflict overseas. It's becoming an economic pressure point that could hit families here at home. Congress is also starting to lose patience during heated hearings today. Both the Republicans and Democrats demanded answers from Pentagon leaders about what actually endgame is. Some lawmakers questioned whether the administration has clear legal authority for a prolonged war, while others warned that the United States could get trapped in another open-ended Middle East conflict with no obvious exit strategy. The tension inside Washington is growing because nobody seems fully certain where this goes next. Officials say America wants deterrence, not escalation, but at the same time, they are openly discussing expanded strike option. That contradiction is exactly what has analysts worried tonight. When both sides says they don't want a bigger war while actively preparing for one, history shows things can spiral faster. At the center of the crisis is the Strait of Hormuz, one of the most strategically important waterways on Earth. Iran has continued signaling that it could tighten pressure around the region if a negotiation fails, and the US military officials argue they must maintain overwhelming force to keep global shipping open. The White House reportedly believes economic pressures and naval control could eventually force Iran back into serious negotiations. But a crisis warned that every new military move increased the odds of miscalculation. One missile strike, one drone attack, or one accidental clash at sea could instantly drag multiple countries deeper into the conflict. Oil traders, defense contractors, and foreign governments are all watching these hours by hours because the stakes are now global, not local. There is also a political clock ticking in America. The rising cost of the war is becoming a major issue heading towards the midterm elections, especially as voters already struggle with the high living costs. Critics are asking why Washington is preparing for $1 trillion defense budget while inflation pressures continue back home. Supporters of the administration argue that backing down would make the US look weak and embolden adversaries worldwide. But the opponents fear the country is sliding into another expensive versus conflict without a clear definition of victory. That debate is likely to dominate cable news Congress and the campaign trail for months because this conflict is no longer just military, it's becoming political, economic, and deeply personal for American voters. And here is why tonight matters to you, even your house. You are thousands of miles away from the Middle East. If this ceasefire breaks completely, the ripple effects could move fast. Higher fuel prices, market instability, cybersecurity threats, military deployments, and growing pressures on allies across Europe and Asia. Pentagon officials insist they are prepared for every scenario, but the reality is that modern conflicts rarely stay contained once escalation begins. The next few days could determine whether this remains a tense standoff or becomes a much bigger, larger international crisis. Right now, the world is watching Washington and Tehran very carefully because one wrong move from either side could change the global economy, American politics, and international security almost overnight. If you like the video, please do consider subscribing to the channel. Stay with me, and I will be back with another video. Till then, goodbye.